So, yo, 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 good to see you. It takes a bit to activate for me here in the mid-afternoon. I normally would be napping and writing and maybe even swimming and talking to a friend or two on some medium other than just words in front of me. So allow me, if you will, along with you, to rise to the occasion. There's some things here that I would like to share, and I also want to return to the more important issue for me, which is you. Questions that you might have, issues of interaction, complexities, whatever it may be. But just as a way of prefacing, what was the word? At lunch over my mango, I was just writing that the Dharma is an act of spiritual disobedience, civil disobedience. I'm in a need in my life to really break free of my orthodoxy. I used the example earlier of Giorgino Bruno, the Italian 15th century astronomer, philosopher, multiverse savant, who discovered that Earth was not the center of the universe. He brought forth the concept experience of infinity, and as a result of that recognition of our being in context without boundary, the Church, I'm not just saying the Catholic Church, the Church of Orthodoxy, the controlled truth, decided that he was irredeemable. He refused to compromise his conscience. He took a radical step, it seems, as I read about it, into the integrity of a truth, was willing to be hung upside down with his tongue cut out and be killed through that process of public execution. Even worse than what I'm saying, burned to death. Pretty wretched. More of my point is this embrace of Dharma or Dhamma, or the true meaning for me personally of yogi, is an act of repetitive, more inclusive breaking, I don't like to use the word frequently, breaking orthodoxy, conformity, lockstep with collective, agreed upon norms, beliefs, and attitudes and behaviors. Cracking the moving coma of religion, and how those particular formations have infiltrated the human soul, the human psyche, through books, digital technology, all ways today that we've been co-opted by these unforgiving structures that make us do things against our own will, called indoctrination. Giorgino Bruno was a living example of being this radical, mystical, astronomical, existential, willing to go to the burning death truth setter, yeah? We've got an example. So I ask you, it's so easy for me to impose upon the outer structure, the Church, the Vatican, and the Pope. I will invite you as we proceed today experientially on your writing, where is your church that you're either worshiping to or unaware of in your worship? Again, we're looking around the corner of our own psyche and soul, which is very transparent and hard to find a boundary, until all of a sudden someone says something that's contrary to your orthodoxy and you feel, wow, I cannot believe what they're saying to upset the quo of my sacred cow. The now is one of the most hollow places in the world to hang out. It's only meant for idiots. Crack the coma of your psychological paralysis and expand your understanding that life isn't myopic. Are you with me? That runs the risk of being seen as like cracking orthodoxy or sacrilege, or being seen as, what are you doing? Are you just a satirist? What are you telling the truth here? What am I supposed to believe? So the yogi, the Dharma savant, the meditator, runs the risk of doing things in the name of liberation that weave them into the coma of their orthodoxy. I've met many meditators that in all good faith, based on predilections unrecognized in the source and the soul, do things against their own best interests and become comatose through awakening. Some of the most advanced meditators who claim to be enlightened are the most paralyzed in narrowness. I mean, I don't know if that makes sense to you. I'll give you an example. I'm trying to address the issue of servitude, indoctrination, and radical honesty. I'm using a very conventional phrase, civil disobedience today, with the activist group Existential Rebellion, where they're asking and advocating global rebellion and civil disobedience against the machinery of capitalism, all global democracies, the use of unending resources when they're obviously infinitely finite. Civil disobedience means the willingness, as you know very well, to confront the collective apparatus that defines culture, society, and politics, and do it with a nonviolent, Bruno-like unwillingness to not only not recant, but to stand in higher altitude with the truth. My teacher, Sayadaw U Pandita, who inherited the Mahasi tradition when Mahasi Sayadaw passed away, who was my preceptor and first teacher, who was one of the first people that brought forth the mindfulness and the mindful intelligence training to lay society. When I spoke with him, which was on multiple occasions, he often joked that the worst meditators were monks. I couldn't quite believe that he would criticize his own tradition so viciously. He said not only were they the worst meditators, it's the ones who were the most skilled theoretically in the traditional teachings that were the really difficult ones. So he went on to explain that by and large, which I'd never really heard the concept, which is very obvious today to you probably, but is spiritual mimicry. Spiritual mimicry, doing things in the name of an image that may not have direct experience either to you or to the principles of your own awakening. You mimic like a puppet. I didn't really see this in meditation until I entered a monastery where it was the vocation of teachers and guides to look at the psychological, emotional structures of how people conformed or prevented their own awakening. And one of them was the structure of dharmic puppetry or mimicry. So he said these teachers, often in theory, highly versed, were so skilled in the theory both of practice and of cosmology, they'd come to the monastery and be asked to simply be aware of their thinking, but they had such an inordinate amount of repressed pride, wanting to do good by their teacher, they told the teacher things that they thought the teacher wanted to hear. And it aligned very intimately in accordance with this timeless theory called Buddhist psychology. And they knew the teachings of insight on paper, but they didn't know them in real-time experience. So often they were the most complex and difficult to move from their existing attachment to their beliefs of how it worked. So here you have Buddhist meditators with Buddhist teachers dealing with the Church of Orthodoxy as preventing them from the liberation of a Giorgio Bruno moment. I'm inviting here in this discussion, where have you developed and what have you developed as your, say, 25 most prominent words and phrases to define your spiritual, psychological life? You can better be sure that those words are the ones that are your church. And I'm inviting you, should you have interest, to not only look at those words and to write without looking in any digital medium for definition. What do you mean by that word? When you use the word mindfulness, what do you mean by it? When you use the word freedom, what do you mean by it? When you use the word truth, what do you mean by it? And look at those 25 words as the constellation of your Vatican. No offense, Pope, but disrobe and come to Ubud. So we're asking ourselves to call ourselves on who are we worshiping? Who's our inner Pope? Who's our church? Where are we unaware of the orthodoxy of what we've built and unwilling possibly to inhabit a freedom from unrecognized dogma? Does that make sense to you? Yeah? If you don't do it, you'll wait until some point in life and just throw the books away and go right back to being a hedonist. But it's better here in this evolution of mindful intelligence to examine carefully, and I've said this word many times, ontological activism. Looking at how we bring into language energy and either deny that energy or meaning, but to reinvest in the living meaning of our words. Margaret called me out today about saying I love her. She said, I don't really think you mean it, she said. I'm just sort of... And she has every right to do that. She's asking, I want to feel it. I don't quite feel it yet. And I'm asking us, as our mindfulness and our self-honesty get coupled with feeling, develop an emotional relationship to the language of your religion, your truth, your Dharma. What does yoga mean to you? What are the 25 operative words? Remember here, it's the empowerment of uniqueness. No two of us will do it alike. Fair enough? I mean, in other words, we're risking becoming unpopular. I know that's a very attractive concept for comedy or satire or theater, but normally we're fighting to salvage the intimacies and trusts that we already have, and the circle is getting smaller. I often joke that authenticity is a wonderful concept to voice as an aspiration, but a horrible experience to put into practice. Most people do not like you the way you are. Become more real. You run the risk of being the only person at your funeral. And so really, what is really, 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 really fucking not that real mean? Like, I can tolerate you to an extent, but I want you to have some serious boundaries to not do this or to say that, not to even think that. I dare encourage you as partners or lovers to sit down for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and not only be in the ear and the heart and the body of each other sexually and intimately, but sit back and talk about your fantasies. You run the risk of separation on the spot or reigniting an eroticism you've never known. Being real, being transparent. It isn't just a spiritual thing. It's an all dimension, all state, all time, all posture practice. Fair enough? I just included there erotic fantasies as equal to silent meditation. Just wanted to slip that in. Just so that we keep cracking the walls of our church. We're all-inclusive, all-dimensional creatures. Life is God. Life is Dharma. Life is Dhamma. You're with me, right? Okay, last thing before we go back to the interactive part of being together. I wanted to share with you, if it was acceptable, I've gone a little bit into the hieroglyphics of my occultism. I've talked with Martin about transhuman, multidimensional existence. I mentioned the UFO word. No one even mentioned it back to me. It's amazing. I thought we were in Ubud. I used the word. It's amazing. I thought that would be like a standing ovation. I mentioned the other aspects of life and surviving death, about out-of-body experiences, telepathy, clairvoyance. So I wanted to just expand a little bit more on my own personal feeling on one of the more interesting areas for me, which is simultaneous coexistence with other dimensions of being and energy. I find that people by and large, either are liberating or possessed and thinking they're liberating. I really actively do believe in possession. People possess themselves with artifice, pride, egoism. You talk to them and they're repetitive robots. Some are ghosts and hollow. I don't know about you, but humans are humans, but a lot of it is almost like AI without the I. And so it's really interesting to me to see how these words elongate and stretch. I'm not talking about other deities alone, and that too. So from my straightforward background of classical mindfulness training, of all things, I had a teacher, Mahasi Sayadaw and Sayadaw U Pandita. The entire basis of existential Buddhism is built thoroughly, intricately into simultaneity of other dimensions of being and other deities coexisting with life everywhere, as we are right now, with all life in lots of dimensions. So you can say hello to Carol up there and Shakti back there. They're not just ghosts, there's a simultaneity. And there are curtains apparently between dimensions that you can't really see each other because you don't have the perception to see them. But obviously, a coarse example, those of you who've lived in waters where there's dolphins, they have a tremendous capacity, don't they? Something like 7 miles that they can hear fine-tuned auditory vibration. Could you imagine walking down the street and feeling 7 miles of people's conversations? Be watchful of you wish for. What does psychic mean? It means like overwhelming fucking debris. I mean, it's enough to deal with one partner and say you love her. Imagine dealing with 100 people sharing the most intimate fucking stupid issues of their life and you've got to listen to that? So psychic phenomena is a two-way street, fair enough? Anyway, the point being is, Mahasi Sayadaw, let me back up, a story in the monastery that was extremely prevalent, that was very compelling to me. Back in 1956 or something, I was a kid, but in the monastery, apparently one woman came to Mahasi Sayadaw up in his upper chamber. And when you come to the monastery, I'll take you there and show you all around the monastery in these places that are normally inaccessible. He had this beautiful home, and there the chief monks and teachers and nuns of the monastery would congregate every morning where they would reacquaint and connect to the teachings and each other to keep it alive and organic, which is a very interesting, I think, practice and pastime. Meanwhile, one woman from the village comes to that particular meeting uninvited. And she sits down in the circle, as I was told, and she begins to speak in a language that was not her native tongue. And they knew who she was, and they knew she didn't know this language. Sort of interesting, right? And she's speaking quite eloquently, and the interesting part here, among many things, the other monks and nuns didn't know what she was saying. But Mahasi Sayadaw, being fluent in the Pali language, knew everything she was saying because he's a very refined linguist in this particular language. And she's speaking in fluent Pali language. And Mahasi and her are talking now in fluent Pali, and it's being recorded. And she is talking about having lived and continues to live in this other dimension of existence, and she is currently inhabiting the mind and body of this particular woman who doesn't know she's being inhabited. It's a full possession. Mahasi knows her, the other people know the girl, and she's speaking in a fluent language, and they're talking together, and so Mahasi asks her, "Who are you? Where did you come from?" And in a nutshell, she says, "I've come from Tavatimsa Loka," which is one of the 6 dimensions above in the human realm, where it's defined by frequencies of consciousness with minimal form. They're beings of light. They're beings of deep dimension, but super, super subtle anatomical creatures that feed on nectar-like ambrosia kind of things and of light. We can imagine that, yeah? Almost like existential hydroponics. And so there are these creatures, and she's living there, and it's a discernible realm in classical Buddhist literature. She says, I'm a deva, and I have achieved a degree of enlightenment under the Buddha. Now, in celestial time, 2,567 years ago or so, when the Buddha was alive, supposedly, is nothing to the time frame in these other cosmologies and dimensions. It's like 10 minutes ago. So the theory of relativity and time and all that, you're with me? It's like you're on an airplane and you're reading The Power of Now in your seat, and you decide to have to urinate. And so you mindfully walk back to the bathroom. You're going 670 kilometers an hour, but you feel like you're in stillness. And so all of a sudden you lose track of time, and you forget the fact that the plane's going around a planet going 25,000 miles an hour. And this particular planet's within a solar system going about 1.5 million miles an hour, within a galaxy of about 17 million miles an hour around the center of this galaxy. Are you with me? Relativity of speed and relativity of time, and how we can become indoctrinated into the church of the now and stillness and define our lives by a lie. Are you with me? So it's very easy to get caught into the human dimension and deny the relativity of this in relationship to that. But a physics course will open us up to many dimensions. Anyway, this woman announces that she's from Tabatimsa. She was enlightened under the Buddha. And Mahasi and her are talking. The recording goes off. She goes home. 35 years go by. Someone in the monastery tells me one day when I'm meditating, have you heard the tape of the Tabatimsa Deva with Mahasi Sayadaw talking? I says, no. What do you mean? She says, well, there was this tape of someone who spoke to Sayadaw who announced her enlightenment from Tabatimsa. And I said, could I have the tape? 15 years went by. I was in Burma recently, last year. I hear a knock on my cottage door. And who is it? It's him. And he gives me a tape. And I'm listening to this thing with a translation, and it's like over the top. There it is. Okay? It's right there. It's real. It was a tape. It was transcribed, but there's no verification that it's real. So, a year goes by. I'm back in Burma again, meditating. I get a knock on the door, and there he is. He said, guess what? We've found the only verification of this tape with Mahasi Sayadaw giving a talk in about 1957 where he's beginning the Dharma talk by saying, there was a woman who came to my cottage back in the early 50s who claimed to be a deva possessing a friend of mine from the Tabatimsa Loka who claimed to be enlightened at the time of the Buddha. It was like finally corroboration. Are you with me? This is like deep evidence of something. This is like one of the most legitimate, intelligent humans in my life, Mahasi and the center in Burma. So coming to the last eighth of this little bit of a story is he is on this particular talk speaking to about 10,000 people, and he makes this comment. This was explained to me and I saw it in the transcription, that in this particular example, this woman was listening to the Buddha in the Tuvakeka Sutta, something like this, where the Buddha in this obscure discourse is talking about the power of presence, auditory vibration, ontological simultaneity, the willingness to live in actualization in reality as we're breathing. He's going into deep immediacy, Leave your story, leave your narrative, leave your problems, leave your resolution, leave your church behind. I'm just paraphrasing. He's saying, listen, up. As it happened for her, I'd like to share this discourse with you in the spirit of how I understood the Buddha to give it, which was in radical immediacy of an awakening without a progressive future of it. So he played the highest stakes in this small little discourse of people. Listen, we're human beings in this highly attuned consciousness with perception. It is one thing to see through the eyes, it's another thing to see into the process of seeing. Relax into both the consciousness of inner beingness as you see and you hear and you taste and you imagine inside of consciousness, still all activity. Feel this innate, transparent, infinite state of consciousness. And right there, occupy the circuitry of non-centrality and be the air without vortex. Be space, be objects, transcend identity. He goes into this discourse of immediacy where we no longer postpone for a better tomorrow. And in this particular discourse, according to the Buddha, countless other deities and devas and brahmas and finer degrees of energy are awakened in this process of intimate immediacy. As humans, he's essentially encouraging us. At times there are things that are developmental. My point? There are other times that you have a choice to rest all preoccupation and choose to live in transparent peace as you are where you are by occupying the space between your phenomena that doesn't deny it, that doesn't grasp it, and be in pure cognitive freedom. And so I share that with you only because we always have a choice to disengage from the debacle of interior narratives, and you have a place of personal respite from cognitive dissonance. Always keep that available to us, to consciously know that we don't have to get the lost thought in, that we can rest more in the innate, infinite ecosystem of psychology, of anatomy, of existentialism, post-life, post-death, and be the intelligence that animates us, rather than the thoughts of that intelligence. Are you with me? So I encourage you, whatever you remember in that, allow ourselves, here I am standing, you're sitting, some are standing. There's the Alan thinking and speaking, and there's the anatomical Alan. There's all the neurons in our brains. Think of the fine energy of what's going on to orchestrate this moment now. Think about how we're just living at this very remarkable topical surface. And it's called us because we've got a 5 and a 6 foot frame that embodies that tiny little perspective. But if we disavow that little perspective and all of a sudden go from the vista of the mountain looking down at the sea to become that which is beneath the ocean, the oceans, the skies, the earth, the space, the galaxies, trans-dimensional existence, trans-life, all life, and fit ourselves out from infinity and in it, and who are you? So the Buddha talked about this. Be willing to die and be reborn in this magical infinity of pure awareness. And I leave that with you. And we've talked a lot about transformational honesty and psychologies and all kinds of things to resolve, to reconcile, and to forgive. A lot of that is very, very important, but equal to that, sometimes when I'm awake in the middle of the night, who said it about panicking? Who was that? Oh, right, Indra. There you go. That there's a way to hold that issue, but at the same time, there's a way to embrace that issue deeper, allow it to be a configuration with the psyche, and just go into pure space. So I invite that. So I leave it to you. Those are the two things I wanted to share. If there are things that you want to share and talk about, I leave it to you. Take a moment and reflect, whatever it may be. Please.
When it comes to being honest, I know you talked a lot about being honest with yourself and kind of self-reflecting, but I guess I have a question about...
I'll repeat it. I'll repeat the question. Go ahead, please.
Sorry. When it comes to maybe a close family member that has an addiction problem, where do you kind of draw that line of maybe being over-honest? The whole radical honesty kind of thing doesn't always seem like it might fit in when talking to a family member relating to that.
I don't want to abscond from such an important sharing, but my immediate response is I would seek personally professional support to help support you in the process of authenticating a family member in your relationship. That it's not an easy task.
Practicing how to say it or what to say with someone?
I would look for someone in your area, in your life, in your concern with the issues that you're bringing up, whatever the form of compulsion is. There's domestic violence, there's alcohol abuse, there's cocaine abuse, there's sex abuse, there's lying. Who knows the different forms of addiction that you're referring to? Only you know, I won't ask you. But I would seek professional support and work accordingly.
It's better to do that than not approach the situation at all, you would say?
I'm not in a position to really advise you.
Yeah. Okay.
It's too sensitive.
Yeah.
And it's so personal, and I wouldn't want to suggest something because it could be the wrong advice. It could be the wrong interpretation, because we don't know each other, and these are very, very big things.
Yeah.
And you're bringing up something that registers for me as extremely sensitive. Okay. That would be the only thing I would suggest, is be very sensitive, not upset the balance, be cool, and seek ongoing, skillful, professional support in the opening to something so complex.
Thank you.
I would keep it also in mind that it's very workable, probably, and leave it at that.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry that I couldn't answer it more directly, but I think that's the most responsible way to handle that. Others with questions or things, please.
I'm here only since Wednesday afternoon, and I hear you using a lot of beautiful.
So,
But I guess
okay. You want to give him this microphone, Margaret?
Yeah, she said she's here. She was happy with that. That's okay.
I will only ask of you, I have a little trouble with your accent.
Okay, I'll try to make it better.
No, I'll try to listen more carefully and you try to make it better.
Everybody gets used to it in general. So I'm only here since Wednesday afternoon, yesterday afternoon. I hear you saying a lot of beautiful words. One, I'm pretty sure you didn't use is harmony. So my question is simple. What would be your definition of harmony?
Harmony, definition of harmony, very interesting. I've used a lot of beautiful words, this gentleman has said. Thank you very much, my friend. You could say it one more time, I'll take it into heart. What is my definition of harmony? My immediate feel with that is that you are just so involved in the intimacy wave rhythm of love with your lover and your friend and your heart and your life and her tribe and your tribe, whomever it is. You're in deep, remarkable, intimate, erotic, romantic, poetic, rhythmic, artistic, aesthetic harmony, where the fluency of keeping at bay as much as possible, fear, greed, need, shadow, you're responsible with that and elegantly accountable. And equally, you beautify space. You're generous as a man, telling your partner, you're wonderful, I love you, these are the things I care about. And silently, you feed and you give. You share your belongings, your body, your life, your bed with someone. You're in harmony. You water the flowers, you pick them, you plant them, you take the vases and clean them. You take care of the children, you take care of the future. You're in harmony. So many ways in which we can look at being in harmony or out of harmony. Leaving things as a mess, as disharmonious. Being psychologically sort of callous and inconsistent and slightly angular and judgmental and blaming and projected. Messy is sort of disharmonious. To leave your shoes, in the wrong place by wearing them in and then throwing them against the wall is really stupid. Very disharmonious. Voting for people who kill people is really bad behavior. So there's many ways. I'd keep it very relative to where you are in your life. What do you want to know about harmony? How could you enhance your harmony? I would look at the intelligence of where you want to be in the poetry of harmony and go, this is my harmonic. These are my colors. This is my music. These are the notes that I'm familiar with. And harmony for me implies relationship. Inner harmony is one thing, but I'm a real advocate today of, and I say this very honestly, man to man, I'm in a deferential relationship with women. I'm not insecure about that. I really concede the fact that women often know, for me in my relationship with women, know often more than I do emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually about aspects of her or me or both. So I'm in a kind of like harmony with like, okay, help me understand. Safety, trust, what works. So that kind of harmony is a very new type of harmony for me. Listening more intimately and responding more quickly to the needs of another is another form of harmony rather than me just being in harmony with me on the terms of my music. So, hope that's not too obscure or whatever, but you want to go further with it? I'll be happy to go with you.
No, that was really your point of view. I was curious about what you were thinking about this work.
I mean, think about the beauty, the utter beauty of kissing someone. I mean, the harmony of that delicious, psychedelic, existential moment where you have your mouth and your saliva and your body and your energy inside of each other. And you are naked in this harmonic elegance. That's high harmony, to be in deep rhythm with that and to infuse that with the sacred and the tender, the beautiful, the quiet, the more robust, dimensionality to harmony. When you're in love, you've got so many reasons to explore and to expand. It's harder to be out here in harmony without that kind of magic and chemistry. But if you've got it, I'm a real believer, good on you, mate. Seize it, evolve it, elevate, and leave the evidence for people like me to see and understand, so that when I have a greater good fortune like that, I have a chance to play in the arenas that you bring forth to me to learn from your idea of harmony. So maybe I'm imposing things on you, but maybe that's just my fantasy. I mean, I just think that the more that we can heighten the beauty of these classical things called love and romance and playfulness. I've said, no one's ever even asked me what I mean by eroticism yet. I keep throwing it out there. Sexuality is sort of like a taboo topic in Ubud. I don't know why it's only at Akasha. No one has asked one question about sexuality. What in the fuck's going on with you? Anyway, so high harmony is, the fact that you asked that question is so fucking beautiful. Thank you. Others? Questions, comments, things that you might want?
Something I'm curious about, I think a lot of people, I'm not sure, but I think I've been coming in contact with a lot of people dealing with, or who is dealing with somebody's having bipolar issues.
Bipolar.
Yeah, and it's like such extremities and super self-indulgence and narcissistic.
Yeah.
And then the person who's actually dealing with this person relieves so much potentiality, because this person is going to come up to the other side better, and then he falls back on again. It's like a constant circle. But then again, it's like being a compassionate being, and you want to be there for this person, but then you keep seeing this pattern recurring, and then you're like,
You asked this question the other day a little bit about being disappointed by being open and intimate, right? So it's moved from disappointment to bipolar?
No, I just see these polarities in life.
I see. So you just use bipolar just sort of, why?
Because I have personal experience as well.
I see. So I don't want to be too personal. I don't want to force the question. And we can cease right now if it's too personal. Is it? Okay. I'm very sensitive to the label of mind, and although I do it actively, but not often publicly, just to let you know that I have a bit of a fraudulence with that, because I'm super sensitive to labeling people. But I conveniently, in my intimate circle, will use labels, because we both know that they're not solid unless you're bipolar. Irreconcilable struggle. Deeply embedded psychological patterns. I mean, so my first thing is I would be very watchful of how we hold labels of good, bad, right, wrong, bipolar, borderline personality disorder is a very common one. I won't ask for a show of hands. It's one of the great stigmas to be labeled as a schizophrenic or even being as autistic. So these labels stick and paralyze phenomena. And equally, when we use phrases like that, or even heightened psychological complexity, say for example, a blameaholic, even the holic part of blame, a rager, a white-out rager. Anyone met a white-out rager? Someone who rages and loses it so much that you can't even hear their words, they get so angry. Anyone ever met someone like that? Who wants to say it? Look at this. Look at the taboo in this incredibly open crowd. They just, I will not admit it. How many of us have been psychologically and physically abused? It sucks, doesn't it? Really, really hurts. Sucks. So really what I'm pointing to here for me, thank you, Jada, is that there are people to hang with, there are people to deal with, there are people to watch carefully, and there are people to know that they're over your head. And I think that that succession of intimacies and compassion need to be protected by a boundary of what you're capable of doing and what you're not. I said this to someone the other day, I don't know who it was, but my brother, who I adore, among the many things that he does that are brilliant, he has worked and volunteered in battered women's home. And he would say that the average length of span of time for a woman to leave an abusive relationship would be 4 years. Often during that 4-year process, they would come temporarily there in Texas. Some of them would have broken noses, broken arms, blackened eyes. Some even lost digits in their fingers and feet. Lost financial, lost sexually, really brutal behavior. Finally, it took 4 years of that, in most cases, to finally get it, that it wasn't their fault. Irreconcilable psychological complexity, right? So I'd be very watchful, you know, and again, I say to this lady in the back, in an area like this, Jada, I think there are those who are super skilled in psychological complexity, and there are not many, but there are some, and just really look beyond your normal family ties and tribe to professional support to get a deeper assessment on the workability of someone and to really seek support, because I don't know about you, among the people that did raise your hand, you can go down the tubes dealing with radical dysfunction. It's not an easy thing to recover from abuse, psychological, verbal, or physical, or all three. And there's many, many insidious forms of that. Anyone here been overtly criticized on a repeated basis where the person is unaccountable to her or his own participation in an issue? That's a classic symptom of a person without conscience. Often it's defining one of the attributes of a borderline personality disorder. If you really want to get out there and look at the sociopathic mind and the mind of a psychopath, I will confide just for one more minute and I'll leave it back to you. side studies for me in my life, being that I've studied psychologies of dictatorship and totalitarianism. It's the deep study of the psychopath, the deep study of collective sociopathy. And these people are often seen as irredeemable on a psychiatric drug level. I once took a flight, pausing, from Los Angeles to Maui, and I sat next to this gentleman who was massive, like 6'10", and he was the chief psychiatrist of the maximum security prison, one of them in Southern California, and we talked for the whole time. He said, these are people who've been removed from maximum security because they're incorrigible, and now they're in lockdown most all the time, and they're also medicated. He said, unanimously, almost across the board, they still deny their role in what happened. It was society, it was my wife, it was my husband, it was other. No accountability. So that's extreme examples. The other fellow who's a neighbor of mine up in Vancouver, Dr. Ware, a book titled Without Conscience. It's the living manual that they use in court to understand the mind of the psychopath. He studied it more than anyone in the world, it seems. So those kind of things are worthy to look into and to see and assess for yourself, especially if someone's crossing the line. A bipolar, to me, indicates degrees of manic, often degrees of verbal, emotional, possibly physical violence. For me, I draw a line. You fuck with me, you're gone. It took me a long time to go there. You hit me, done. You go public and rancid on me, you're blocked. You can do what you want, that's fine. You can tell the world what an asshole I am, but you're out of my life. And I think that's a very important recognition to know, I don't want to do that. I want to do what this gentleman's talking about. I want to be in high harmony today. Time is short. I have no time to work it out with people who need to work it out with a professional. So I would really get smart, stay in studious dimension, and be vigilant not to allow yourself to believe that abuse is acceptable. I'm not sure that you're saying that, but if there's any part of that in anyone, as I would certainly tell my daughter, abuse is wrong. Downright wrong. Let them work it out with professionals. Step out. If you want to forgive at some future point, fine. But there's no need to work it out. Let them seek professional support. So.
Can you just announce that I'll stop recording if anyone has something more personal to say? You want to say that?
We're good. Are you okay with this camera on me? Anyone who isn't? No. Everyone's cool? If you do want it off when you're talking, just tell me and Nick and I will turn it off. Take your time. There's no hurry. This is what we're here for. This is really anything at all that you may want to include that's personal, that's theoretical, that's addictive. Take your time, please.
No, I'd like to ask, because you brought it up, we were talking about sexuality specifically.
Okay, finally we get some sex into the story.
Specifically, I'd like to understand a little bit more about your views on Tantra, and because it's thrown around a lot, and there are many different schools, and I'd just like to get your perspective.
She's asking my views on Tantra, and I'll say very directly, I know very little about Tantra, and probably even less about sexuality, but I have feelings about Tantra, I have feelings about sexuality, but they're not confident proclamations or truths at all. So please don't hear it in that way. I often joke in my little world that I'm a post-tantrika type. I don't like being confined at all by a label, like you're a Buddhist, you're a meditator, you're a mindful, intelligent savant, you practice Tantra. It's like, it's so, for me, I know it works, it sells, it's smart, it's sexy, but it's a turnoff for me personally. So anyone out there who's interested in me, don't use the word Tantra. I can't stand it. What I like is uniqueness, intimacy, unpredictability, playfulness, humor, I really like intimacies that aren't conformed to practices and trainings you've done. I find personally, again, no offense to all the Tantra goddesses and gods, I'm not really one who wants to sit down and breathe together. Okay, no offense to those who do it, but I'd rather just hang out and have a glass of wine and breathe together and read poetry, talk a little bit about Rumi, talk a little bit about Bill Hicks, talk a little about Donald Trump, talk about the end of life, cry a little bit, make love, be erotic, watch a film, come back to it, drink some more vodka, and post-Tantra it. I don't know if they teach that in Tantra, but if they do, I'm coming. So breaking labels, I like the rebel, I like the mavrika, the person, the woman, the guy who is defying orders. I have lots of friends that are escort, who are sex workers, who are soldiers. There's something very liberated about them. Strange as it is to say that to you, maybe curse me dead, whatever you want to say. I like people who are really misfits, who don't fit the normal molds. And I hear the word Tantra and bless their heart of healing a lot of ancient shame and worry. They do beautiful work. I know some of these women and men. They're magnificent creatures. And those who are inclined to so-called awaken through that, why not? But for me personally, I'm much more of the unorthodox intimate who likes naturalness and uniqueness and a whole range of things, except I'm not down with any porn. I don't connect. I've seen too much war porn. I've seen too much sexualizing killing. I've seen in Yugoslavia and even in Burma the impulse of the man and the woman as well, who overtly connects to the denigration of others in an orgasmic way. It's an unknown thing that often isn't explored in normal circles. But it's an orgiastic sense of violent eroticism that I would only call war porn. It's why it's such a fever among men and women and politicians. And why are we selling weapons all over the world in the name of freedom when we're doing nothing but exporting and creating a heightened industry of mass murder? I think it's really about a perversity of sexuality. So porn, in other words, is in any variation, whether it be freedom porn, spiritual porn, trauma porn. I recently saw a film, I don't want to criticize it, it's called Dosed. It's D-O-S-E-T. It tracks a young woman in Vancouver who is a compulsive addict, and the whole premise is based upon dosing. I'll let you fill in the blanks with what that could be, until eventually she takes such a high dose of this very African-born organic root that eventually, after about a year or two of relapses and struggles and horrors, being filmed intimately up close with her traumas and her breakdowns and her vomiting and her needles and her transgressions, she finally breaks free of the pattern of needing to use. And so it's, I find, a massive infomercial for the new big pharma, which is the psychedelic medicine movement. And to me, it's a substitution model rather than an overcoming or beautification model. And yes, maybe it works, but I found it to be trauma porn. And I found that the male healers in it, bless their heart, I've said this before, should step down, because I felt that the unconsciousness of their energy in itself was very traumatizing for me and for the woman I was with, who's a very renowned clinical psychologist. And I think it was a great oversight that this wasn't felt in the release of this film. And so I'm very watchful of what Tantra means and what it isn't, sexuality means. So I really put it out there as, I'm not into the harder, faster, deeper model on a sexual tantric level. I don't care what it is, it just doesn't work for me. I'm much more of a laid back, intimate, tender, sweetened, trans, before Tantra, post-Tantra. I don't like formalizing orgasm either. It's like a little bit too much church in it. It's like all roads lead to my yoni kind of thing, and orgasms, the endless fucking orgasm. Like, come on, like, isn't there something beyond an orgasm? Isn't it like said to be intimate? Why do I have to like rub my hands over your energy body to see you convulse on a table because you can move energy, and I'm just having this endless fucking full-bodied orgasm? It's something like a caricature in me, for me. I mean, it maybe it's because I'm older, but it just looks a little bit weird. Maybe for younger people who have much more energy and chemistry for that, go for it. You know, there's dance moves for some, but again, the Tantra thing, it's too churched. And I'm really, as you know, not a churchgoer. So I hope that answers your question without absconding from it.
I tried to open up the space for what you wanted. Eroticism.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You mentioned eroticism then.
Eroticism. What would you like to know, please?
Well, you said nobody's asked you about the
No one has.
definition of it. So let's hear it.
What's my definition of eroticism? The playful, agreed upon, safe provocation of sexuality and intellect and rapturous sexuality. Just the creative interplay of intelligent, provocative, safe sex. Creative, super indulgent in losing ourselves in the sexual, romantic, experimental expansion of what really excites the spiritual, existential, physical genome of our shared space. So anything there goes, should it be consensual. You know, that would be my sense of eroticism. But I would want to know what yours was, not necessarily at this moment, maybe a little later, but at this moment, like, where would we go together to create a new eroticism? That's very erotic. Like, what turns you on? And I've sat with my partners before, and who hasn't sat and talked about intimate erotic fantasies? Is there anyone here who hasn't? Don't raise your hand. You've got an exciting future. Those of you who have loved it, it's coming tomorrow. But that's one of the most delicious things to do, is to hang out and do what you need to do to heighten the space. And hey, let's talk about what turns you on, what's turned you on. How many of you have talked to your partners about past lovers? Not that it's indulgent alone, but there's something about reliving in a heightened way the eroticism of what you did. That's very erotic for people. How many people I've spoken to who like watching their partner make love with someone else. That can be highly erotic, if that's consensual and that's the desired expression. Is this okay? Look at the... Samantha, come up here and help me, please. You're okay with this? Is this too much information? Your eyes are like going like this. It's like... I thought we were in Ubud, for God's sake. I'm a conservative former Buddhist monk. You're the fucking people out there that do Tantra. I'm a celibate, for God's sake. You've had more sex in the last month than I had in 2 years. I'm not done with eroticism yet. This is like waiting for this fucking moment.
Continuing with the thing.
And so I'm just kind of going further out there, is that I think that's very erotic sometimes, a lot of the times, most of the time, to include dimensions that are slightly taboo, taboo. So that we challenge how we've created the orthodoxy of confinement within our emotional, romantic, sexual level. And it's one thing to be polyamorous, it's a whole other thing to be open and really engaged in the variety of erotic behaviors. But I lived in Paris for 3 years. For God's sake, anyone lived in Paris? It's natural. Shiva knows. It's natural that you go out to these fine clubs, you can only be with a couple, you have a great dinner, and there's a whole range of behaviors, from elegant spiritual sadomasochism to agreed upon group sex to fond touching of body and heart and mind through the reading of poetry while people are making out. It's like, wow, the openness of the space to take off the shingles and the shackles of what confines us to live in these boxes of 9 to 5 and churches and ties and all the cliches that I have for conventional self-murder and the murder of other people in the name of this unliberated, not just sexuality. I found as a monk meditatively that sexuality wasn't a second chakra action. It was pretty much the life force of being. And to think that it was only through genital contact that sex happened was really denying the eroticism of consciousness. So I would not end, but I would begin with, I find people's minds highly erotic. I find their looks highly erotic. I find that the way that they move their body highly erotic. I wish people would ask me, what do you think about the way that I'm thinking and speaking and moving? That's a very erotic question. But it's not easy to do that at a cafe over a glass of wine and yet another grilled chicken plate. But it's invited. So eroticism doesn't need to be confined to dark rooms or alone with partners. It can be reinvented into a kind of sapio-spiritualized sexuality that includes the taboo, that plays at the edge. And there's something very erotic, even just sitting next to someone in which you're just touching each other in some erotic way. It doesn't necessarily need to be so overtly sexual, but there's a very fine edge between intimacy, sensuality, romance, and eroticism. I say playing in those dimensions. So, thank you very much. May I say it's only a first question. It just opens the door. Heidi, please, anything you want.
So maybe this is opening a can of worms, but at what point, like, in your opinion, is, like, obviously there is a broad range of the whole realm of whatever sexual fantasy is. At what point does it become wrong?
This is interesting. I think wrongness in sexuality is when there has been an agreement of trust and safety and nonviolence, that it exceeds the ability of the other to understand the boundary of trust and safety, and now you're exploiting the initial agreement and they don't know what they're doing. So I think you need to check in with trust and safety all the way along the line.
I'm talking specifically about fantasy though. So this is entirely inside your own mind.
Oh, inside your own mind,
As
without a
in,
partner.
Yeah, exactly. If you're talking about like a sexual fantasy.
When does it become wrong?
When does it become wrong?
Wow,
exactly.
that's an interesting
It's inside your head. So
Heidi,
when is it wrong?
Heidi has opened up the door.
Like I said, can of worms. Like, where's the line?
Can of worms. That sounds like an erotic sex parlor to me. I dare ask you, young woman, what would you like to do inside of that mind of yours? Let us hear, like a Picasso painting brought forth on this infinite canvas of possibility.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, anything. Like, anything can happen in my mind. Anything. So so when is, that's the thing. When is it wrong to think it? Because you can think something and you can very easily find a thought arousing in a way that it might not be in real life, and that's why it's a fantasy, right?
Okay, I hear you. Okay, I'll get serious about it. I wanted to say, ultimately, nothing is wrong if it's self-initiated within one's own psyche and mind. And I would only couple that with conscience and integrity and joy. And if it's a masturbatory fantasy or a hoped-for partner-based or group encounter, why not? If it requires consent, of course, go for it and explore. I think there's the only teacher that I can see is life experience, and it be consensual. The other side of it is, when do I cross the line with what turns me on? Or even what I'm willing to entertain inside of my mind that I go like, oh my God, Alan, did you really have that image in your mind? Whoa, man, you need to fucking go to a shaman, and that's where purging comes real. You got to get rid of that. You do not want to be fucking that dog. Okay, so is that wrong? I mean, it depends what his name is. Is it Shakti? Is it Robert? Is it asshole? Is, anal sex wrong? Is having sex with a minor wrong? Yep. Yep, it is. It is. Jeffrey Epstein was real. And it happens all around the world. So, but it's inside the psyche, and I don't want to demonize that. I'll close with this, and we can open it up to the next can of worms. I would sanctify, this would be my approach to my inner world, is to sanctify, to trust, validate, and inquire with intimate respect all things imagined, dreamed, and felt. I refuse to participate in self-demonization. So I have thoughts of seeing someone crucified and masturbating to this next Jesus. I would look at the metaphor of that rather than the literal expression of that as a turn-on, and try to understand more of dimensions to it and integrate that learning into my theater, into my intimacies and friendships, and probably see the unusualness of that fantasy. And then I would check it out, as I mentioned here to this woman, I would check it out with my few friends that are professional and try to get an insight into why I'm having it, where did it come from, what to do with it, because it's repeated. And now I'm actually self-pleasuring through seeing the next Jesus as I'm masturbating. And why am I doing that? Because I'm a repressed evangelical pastor, that I have a Jesus complex and I don't deserve it? I'd move into the psychotherapeutic relationship to anything and take the wrong out of it and take the discovery deep into your heart. So I hope that answers the question. Nina?
So the next step is like how to open that mindful things that like I have it in my mind, but how to bring it to your partner when you just have normal sex all your life. So we're together since 15 years and everything is normal, and it's getting like we're having sex since 2 years. Yeah.
So where to go from here?
So, yeah, how can I bring these ideas to my partner when you see he's not open for anything? He's like that normal, just a normal thing, and you don't want that.
That's a very vulnerable comment. Thank you, Nina. I think it speaks to many people here, past, present, and possibly in the future. It certainly speaks to me. If I were to personalize that, I would sense that, as probably difficult as it is, you have the power. And rise to the feminine-inspired mother, epic wife, lover, erotic goddess in you, and seize the experience to evolve, co-evolve this dynamic with your husband. So number one is, I can do it. Challenging, radical challenge. 2 years in abstinence, reluctance, probably daily, monthly, in different ways, dealing with deep-rooted shame and rejection issues possibly, being inadequate, feeling unwomanly, feeling unsexual, deeply de-eroticized as goddess, all the things that happen when you're being refused a man or a woman's body and heart. It's not just sex. You're being de-enthralled from romantic commitment and intimacy and trust. You don't turn me on, girl. And that's a very rude message, a very difficult message to receive or to be feeling about oneself or one's partner. So when I say rise to the epic challenge, it'd be irresponsible to you, Nina, as an emerging friendship, not to say you'll soon be going home, leaving here, and you'll soon be traveling probably again, Find people, find a man or a woman, primarily an older woman, who you can speak with about your soul. I cannot live a week without my principal tribe, psychotherapists, spiritual people. You need it. We need the Kalyanamita in our life. We need the principal advocate of our well-being. And try to find someone like myself or someone that you're connected to who is not wanting to do what Heidi and I just did, not to marginalize it is wrong. You can do it, because if it ends, I don't want to give you too much advice. It's not advice at all. I'm just speaking passionately because I know what you're in and I've been there. You don't want it to end knowing that you didn't do everything possible, right? And if you need to walk, or he walks, or both walk, you want to give it the most conscious uncoupling imaginable. You want to show all of Bali and the whole world how you, Nina, and your husband and your children did everything humanly possible within the complexity to say it's not working in the way that we once married. I don't want to make you wrong, hon. I don't want to make me wrong. We want to consciously uncouple for each other and for the children, and namaste that thing. So 2 major points to begin with. Rise to the occasion. You're the woman. There's some wrong in his soul. As a man, it's very easy to impose that wrong on you, the woman. My 3rd point is, probably, likely, he needs what most men need, is another man in his life. One of the greatest shortcomings in the masculine life, look around men, maybe you know, you would agree or not agree, I find the lack of mentors. People that you can be touched by and listen to. Ask intimate questions on finances, body, health, relationship, sexuality, being a dad, being a single dad. You need higher energy information on a consistent basis where the man feels respected and supported to ask the most difficult things. And more than that your husband needs to hear things that are difficult for him to hear. Hey dude, there's a new way today. Okay, that's point 3. So in your own unique way, I'd encourage you, if you were my wife and I was saying to you as my wife, I don't want to be with you. Like the fuck, why would I not want to be with you? I got 2 beautiful kids. I'm at the peak of my life. We're in beautiful Ubud. We've got a great friends. You're attractive. I'm attractive. We're not making love. Something's wrong here. It ain't going to get any better than Nina. Hey, listen, dude. I'm talking to you. Snap out of it. That girl is going to be with a new guy in 46 seconds. You're going to be such dust under the wheel. You're going to be crowing for the rest of your fucking life because you're going to get some borderline personality bitch who's going to ruin you because you fucked up Nina. And you need a guy who tells him, snap out of the coma, dude. It's not about you alone or her. It's emerging into the new male. The mythic masculine needs to be empowered today. I'm an older guy. You know, I don't give a fuck. But younger men need support. And I'm taking a very leadership mentor role in some men's lives. When they're open, we talk honestly. I'm very comfortable appreciating men. I've been really validated by men my age and older men who really get me. You're an amazing storyteller. You're an amazing artist. You're amazing in front of people. You're super talented. You're a good writer. You're dysfunctional with women, but so be it. But we need each other as men. It's not just equal men. We need to be in mentoring roles. I would say that your husband, without asking your ages, needs a mentor. And maybe he does. I'd reinvent it. The last thing is, how beautiful it would be if we could get him into an environment like this so that you didn't ask me the question. This lady asked me the question. He's overhearing the question that you're asking me, and I'm talking to her about things that matter to him. So he's very proud, he's good looking, he's sexy, he's pissed, but he's going like, oh man, this is making sense. You go home, how did you think about it, honey? I don't like him. I don't like him. I don't like him. 2 weeks later, that was very interesting. Thank you for bringing me to that event. It was very cool. I'm like, Do you want to get naked together and have a hot tub? What do you want to do? I just want to hang out and just be what he was saying, just like comfortably naked, and let's eroticize the space without making love. What in the fuck So be willing to be surprised. I know you've got attitudes and feelings, I would have them too, but be open. Reinvent the moment as virginal. With all of your wisdom as a woman, as a mother, and as a wife, give your man this great gift. I would wish someone had told my former partner this. Give him a great gift of your unwillingness to tell a deeper truth. Share with him the guts of your soul when you need to, in the right safe moment. So those are some of the things. It's on tape. You can hear it on Facebook. Nick will give you a little copy of this so you can personalize it and you can drop it into his phone somewhere and say it was sent by a porn star in Bolivia, whatever. And then, God, Nina, have you seen this? It's like someone's speaking to me. So be radically creative and that kind of thing. But the last point is, I would only support you as your emerging friend, is try to do everything imaginable to decouple it being wrong, something wrong for you. And if there are things, talk to your sisters where you may see a shortcoming here. You know, maybe your unrecognized behaviors could be threatening. Men get very, very protective and territorial. Despite the fact of whatever they're monogamous or polyamorous, it's like, you're polyamorous on my terms, not on your terms. You want to have love with that guy? You got to prove to me first. They don't say that. So maybe you're doing things, I don't know. We've talked a little bit. I'm not trying to put words into your soul or say things to you that you've already told me. But I'd look at like triggering points in this next couple of months and see if there could be a reinvention of non-triggers to see if the playing field changes a bit. And you know, one of the most difficult things for men is to deal with jealousy. No matter how advanced or awakened they are, jealousy is a real issue. It goes right to the genetic coding of being a family, protecting the children, the wife, all that kind of thing. So you're an attractive woman in an incredibly vulnerable, psychologically sexualized environment. You're not making love, it sounds like, or being touched as a man and a woman often do. So you're vulnerable to the movements of your soul and your body. And that could be, without being pronounced to you, a deep re-triggering, and therefore the repetitive, well, fuck you. You're not going to get close to me. So just as you come closer and closer to clarity, you want to make sure that if it ends, it may not end on your terms, that you've covered yourself. Because regret and remorse in a marriage like that or a long-term relationship is really hard. You could live for a lot of years with a number of lovers and never feel good again for a lot of time. So just take care of yourself on that level. And we can repeat this conversation, go further anytime if you need support. Last question before we take a break, if there's anything that you'd like to ask, or continuing the exploration of eroticism and sexuality and enough for enough? I thought we were in Ubud, for God's sake. You guys dance for hours in contact dance. You can't even speak for 45 minutes about sex. How funny.
Okay, I was going to ask another question.
Oh, Heidi's coming out of the closet.
I like this topic.
Heidi's coming out of the closet. Go ahead.
We've talked about this a little, so you know this is of personal interest to me. What caused you to decide to be abstinent, and what would be the thing that would make you
Change.
not be abstinent again?
Awesome question. The abstinent part came, ironically, just today. My two beloved friends came from Byron Bay, whom at the end of my last relationship, I'll end with this, we'll move on, but in a brief although I completely love talking about it. At the end of an incredibly intimate, provocative 2-year relationship that ended quite abruptly and quite suddenly on many levels. And coupled with the processing pretty much for the third time of multiple deaths, the acute psychological loss of Burma through international shaming and vilification of the country. The monks have been demonized, and my friend Aung San Suu Kyi, the state councillor, the Nobel laureate, vilified. I had a book and a film that were cancelled. My finances, my database, my sponsors pretty much evaporated. The death and the loss of a relationship, there was what felt to be an unsuspecting mortal wound. And I went from what felt to be a very slowly, conscious, mindfully, intimate, breathtakingly beautiful, reciprocal, erotic, tender, spacious love affair in which there was a long foundation of friendship and family connection. How could it not be this immeasurably intimate, trusted future together? And so when that collapsed quite suddenly and unbeknownst to me how and why, based on circumstances, coupled with these other things, I think, I went into a deep sense of unrecognizable Alan. And my friends who are here, Paul and Liz, they're just coming today, you'll meet them soon. We're on FaceTime together. I was in Canada, and they said, Alan, you do nothing else but get on a flight and come and stay with us. They have the preeminent healing center in Australia, Temple Byron. You do not buy your food, you do not cook your food, you do not buy anything. We are fully supporting you here until you find your ground again. And if it wasn't for them, I would be sure I'd be existential roadkill. I had no real reason at that stage of life to carry on. I had my daughter, but I thought of all kinds of ways to get around that, and I was very skillful about doing that. But I went there, and I deeply collapsed into what they labeled through therapy and all kinds of other healing modalities, the unseen self. So not only was I unable to feel intimate or sexual, I was psychologically and emotionally obliterated from any identity that I could recognize. And I made a conscious decision at that time to both survive and to reel in all my energies. I couldn't talk. I could hardly walk. I lost maybe 30 pounds. I was on pharmaceutical substances, and it was deep existential physical survival. I really took it deep. I don't know if you've ever been there before. I didn't know that I could do that much pain. There was no processing involved out of some kind of strange choice making. And so that 3-month period led to 6 months, and I got back onto my feet. And I said, it's just too easy to consciously open up that door again. I may have told you, but 3/4 of the way through, even when we met, we were friends for years prior. I mean, I have only known you a few months, a few days, few months, years. You get very familiar with someone when you've been friends for years, right? You know their mother, their father, their friends, their colleagues. You've done retreats together, you've meditated. I knew her partners, she knew mine. So it was like, wow. And then to have that kind of connection and to finally feel that there's an attraction, which there was at a certain point. Ironically, it was the very day my mother died. And we acknowledged yes, there's a foundation of incredible specialness here, and let's explore it. So we decided to spend 3 months without openly, physically, sexually making love. We really did it differently. We didn't need to do that again. So we did all kinds of other tender, playful things, and talked and FaceTimed and danced and ate and walked and did yoga. Both of us really loved yoga. And eventually we moved into a more intimate sexuality and eroticism. And so when that ended, I was lost. My Buddhism was out the door, my country was out the door, my friends were out the door, my finances were out the door, my books had been pulled the plug on, the film that I'd spent 3 years filming was out the door. And I didn't know who I was. And who you see today, Alan, who I see today, is not in any semblance to an Alan a year ago. You would not have known this presence a year ago. So I realized that I refuse not to be open because I'm heterosexual with women. But I do not feel safe enough in my physical, emotional body to be naked and physically, sexually intimate. That's a very rare thing for me to have said, because I could be easily not distracted, but comfortably almost healing through that. But I don't have the confidence that I'd hold it in a way that would be healing for me. And I think I also don't feel that I have the confidence that it would be right for you. So I decided to joke about this label being a polyamorous celibate. And I really love, as you know, in our relationship, I love the woman, I love talking and relating, but I've consciously drawn a boundary. So that's why I've chosen that, because I'm evolving into a new masculinity. And I feel like I'm liking what I see. And so I'm not giving up the support systems so quickly, even though I've been attracted and I feel open to different women. But I don't feel that I want to go that extra step. And maybe I could be losing something in healing and growing together. Now, what would answer that question for me, to answer your last question? What will move me from that place? I've asked my therapist a lot about this, and I've asked women friends of mine about this. I ask myself every now and again, this or that. It will be, number one, a real acknowledgement that it's the right chemistry. I think without that, it doesn't happen. 2, it'll be slow in forms of intimacy, and a partner really gets that the chemistry is there. We've acknowledged that we want to explore being closer, and there's an ease of being with that. And my sense is, to answer the question, I just believe in the natural arrival of that chemistry and that reciprocity when it happens. So that's the simple answer. Simple. I don't feel a need for it to happen. It's kind of uncanny sometimes that I go to bed and wake up now even with feeling a greater sense of independence, less need or desire for it. Sometimes I get a little scared that maybe I've moved beyond it. But I do believe the people that I've met, that I knew this woman for 3 years, long before she and I did not have one sexual thought about each other. So there's an example in my life of how it happened. And yet we were so down with each other romantically and erotically and sexually and spiritually. It was pure magic. So I believe in the almost the ineffable that happens. If we're meant to be there, I believe that in my integrity and your integrity, it'll evolve into something more beautiful, more intimate. So, thank you for the question.
Thank you for the answer. I related to a lot of what you said.
And my friend, whom I would very much like to still be friends with, I mean, we met after that separation. She's a remarkable individual. I have attitudes about the ending of it, but that's my work. That's my work, and I wish her well, I wish her and her partner well, I wish her family well, and may each of the relationships that we have, I know in my life, I've been blessed by beautiful men and beautiful women, and I do believe in the evolution of beauty. And if it's not that, it'll be something even more magnificent. Again, I don't know the Alan today from 4 months ago. So I'm working hard, intimately awake to becoming more fertile with the romance, the eroticism, and the beauty of what I really truly want now, because I've integrated another 60% of my psyche that I did not know a year ago. And if you wanted to get specific about that at another time, I'd be happy to share with you what I did see that I didn't see. I'm a real believer of, quote, the orthodox checking of the boxes, you know, and I have my boxes that are needing to be checked to find a reason to be intimate or physical or romantic or even friends, but mostly a committed partnership. Never say never, but if you're polyamorous, I have no interest, zero, none, zero. Even if you're open relationship, I have no interest, that kind of thing, none. I don't know about you, but there are things that I know and things that I really know. And I'm not wanting to have to deal with me telling you I'm triggered. I'd rather just shoot the fucker and you too.
I totally relate. I basically ended up celibate as a consequence of an open relationship.
Is that right?
And it was a fucking killed me.
I appreciate your courage to bring these questions up. I advocate, I mean, the gentleman in the back brought up celibacy for 2 days or once a week. I really advocate for those who are keen on experimentation of heightening our intimacy to taking a conscious period of not abstinence, but just conscious celibacy. I think there's something very magnificent about that. And so, okay, let's take about 10 minutes or so to chill, keep the place silent if you would, take notes, walk around, and we'll come back in for a meditation. Thank you.